Here now with more on his big release, House Judiciary Committee Ranking Member Doug Collins. First, thank you. We wouldn't know so much that we know but for your courage to release these closed-door testimony documents. What did you take out of yesterday beyond about Loretta Lynch and so much more?
Well, thanks, Sean. I think one of the things that John just talked about is the American people are turning because they're seeing the truth. For the first time, they're actually seeing these testimonies that the investigators did, and you saw that with my colleagues, with Ratcliffe and Jordan and Meadows and others who did this. We're seeing the truth of Gowdy. What they found out is that there was a conflict. What they were finding out was that there's this cover-up because they knew that if it was ever uncovered, that there would be trouble. Lynch, we knew it was basically, we've already seen the incompetence that she showed as Attorney General. Now we're seeing them turning on Jim Comey, who his little run as Captain America is coming to an end. He is not what he has portrayed himself to be, and there's going to be answering for that based on what we see in these transcripts. There's contradictions at every turn.
Well, what do you make of John Solomon's report? We know the Bruce Orr warning. We know this woman 10 days before the first FISA application warned all these upper echelon. Again, not rank and file, not the 99%, very important. And they were warned in so many different ways. They had probably 10 times the amount of evidence that was exculpatory, including transcripts we're going to hear about, as John said, in the next week or so, within the next week, and they never listened to it. Why?
Because it was I think they'd had a pattern all the time. Sean, we've talked about this before. This is a corrupt cabal of the top leadership who did not like candidate Trump. They definitely didn't like the thought of a President Trump. And now what they were doing is they were covering for themselves. They had what they believed, I think, was their insurance policy. They believed what they had was going to be the investigation that would show that there was a problem. And what really is disturbing here is they knew that they had a problem, that they was with these information they were getting from Steele in this dossier, and yet they went with it. As you said earlier, Comey verified this in the FISA application, but yet just a few months later said they were very unverified and salacious. We still have that today. That's the thing that's interesting here. They've never been verified. This is the problem that we're having, and they're turning on each other.
Well, and now look at this. Basically, the Attorney General under Obama, Lynch, basically accusing the FBI director at the time of perjury. Congressman, this is so important what you're doing. Thank you. We appreciate it. Congressman Collins from Georgia.
Meanwhile, let's talk about something else that seems to be percolating underneath, and that is investigating the investigators and how the whole investigation into the Donald Trump campaign, which turned into the president-elect, which turned into his presidency, took place. And I'm astounded on a daily basis how many major players in this group seem to be turning on each other. Yesterday, the ranking member of the House Committee, Congressman Collins, released this information on Loretta Lynch's behind-closed-door testimony. And it seems, again, Loretta Lynch, the former Attorney General, contradicts James Comey on the so-called, let's call the Hillary investigation a matter, not an investigation. The problem with James Comey's story, he's not arguing with Fox or Donald Trump. He's actually arguing with the Attorney General for Barack Obama, who he clearly worships.
So let's start this, and we're going to show you how it does appear either the Attorney General or the FBI Director, former both of them, they're not on the same page. Here's James Comey talking before the Senate Intel Committee in 2017, and he's talking about why he decided to have that press conference in the summer of 2016. And one of the things that led to it was, of course, the tarmac meeting, but also his conversation with the Attorney General regarding, was it an investigation of Hillary Clinton or something else? And he dropped this bombshell then.
The Attorney General had directed me not to call it an investigation, but instead to call it a matter, which confused me and concerned me. But that was one of the bricks in the load that led me to conclude I have to step away from the department if we're to close this case credibly.
All right. So yesterday, Doug Collins releases the transcripts of his interview and when Loretta Lynch had to go in front of lawmakers and was testifying behind closed doors. He released the testimony that she said, no, we never had that conversation. I didn't say that. This is what she said to the group. She said, I didn't direct anyone to use specific phraseology. I said, what I have been saying is we have received a referral and we are working on the matter, working on the issue, or we have all the resources resources we need to handle the matter, handle the issue. I was quite surprised that was his characterization of it, because that was not how it was conveyed to him, certainly not how it was intended.
Right. So move the politics out of this for a second. Just understand this. 6'9" James Comey and Loretta Lynch can't get together on something key behind the scenes, which prompted James Comey to have that July press conference. And that is, she thought that she didn't want, the Attorney General wasn't pursuing aggressive enough, the fact that Hillary Clinton used a private server, and some of her emails might have been exposed, affecting national security, and of course the sanctity of her candidacy. Is someone that irresponsible, should that be the next president of the United States? So this isn't politics. These are two people who are united on one thing. They don't think Donald Trump is worthy of being president, and they can't agree on something fundamental. And for those other people that can't agree that James Comey is not telling the truth, maybe they can line up with Loretta Lynch now instead of saying lining up with somebody on the Trump team.
Loretta Lynch went on to explain she only suggested to Mr. Comey, the Department of Justice policy said that, we cannot confirm that we are at the investigation stage. So, they did have a conversation, but it was not the way he described it in front of the Senate.
She said that conversation with him was in September of 2015, and she said the way that it works within the DOJ is we have to investigate fully. She said, but at this point we weren't sure if this was an investigation. We were just looking into this matter.
Right.
I wonder if he ran out and took notes and then called up his friends at the New York Times to write a column about that. Why didn't he run out to his car and take notes on that? Then everything would have been solved.
Well, we don't know why they have different stories. It appears somebody is perhaps not telling the truth, or they have different memories, whatever it is. Here's John Yoo, former Deputy Attorney General, and his observation about the discrepancies.
There's a lot of pages about, is this a matter? Who decided to essentially clear Hillary Clinton in those first press conferences? As you can tell, as you're suggesting, Laura, neither Comey nor Loretta Lynch now wants to take responsibility for essentially clearing Hillary Clinton. But one of them did, because they're both in charge. The FBI and the Justice Department, they're in charge, and they shouldn't, I don't think, have ever gone public and cleared her in the first place. But they went and took that momentous step and started this whole chain reaction of events. I think that led us into the investigation of Trump.
So he didn't know Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were having an affair and hated Trump to the point where they were texting back and forth. He didn't know about the emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop that were put there by Hillary Clinton's chief of staff. But Andy McCabe says, I did tell James Comey. Comey said he never told me. So he's got a little problem. If he's right all the time, all these other people around him that are supposedly on his side are wrong. Not just people like Donald Trump, who he despises, but people on his side. Sooner or later, James Comey's going to have to admit that there are problems with his story, not everybody else's.
Well, James Comey and the former Attorney General certainly not on the same page. It'll be interesting to see how she explains that, and I'm sure she'll try.
He's throwing everyone under the bus. He'll do another interview. We'll find out how he wants to explain this one.
Let's bring in Fox News senior political analyst Britt Hume. Britt, good morning to you.
Hi, Sandra.
So you saw what went down there at the top of the 10 o'clock hour Eastern time. What did you think of it?
Well, I've covered a bunch of these executive privilege assertions in the past, and I'm not sure Nadler has got it right when he says that the Supreme Court has rejected such claims. The Supreme Court has at times ruled that certain presidential documents or testimony over which executive privilege has been claimed still must come forward. But in the Watergate case, where it had to do with tapes of White House conversations, they were turned over to a criminal inquiry, not a congressional hearing, and the court in that opinion recognized the existence of an executive privilege for the purpose of making sure that presidents get confidential advice from their senior advisors. That is a privilege that has long been recognized, and if the White House counsel is not a senior advisor, I don't know who is. So I think on this point that Nadler's position may be weak on the law. On some of these other assertions the president is making, for example, with regard to those financial records that a judge ordered turned over yesterday, I'm not sure the president is on such strong ground. But on the McGahn testimony, I think he is. And I think that's sort of where we are. And it'll be interesting to see if Nadler tries to go to court, because if he does, I don't think in the long run he will win.
Very interesting. And about the same time that hearing began, Britt, Senator Lindsey Graham was not too far away, and he made this observation. Here's Lindsey Graham.
what they want to do in terms of claiming, executive privilege. If I were the White House, I would fight this effort because they made McGahn available to Mueller. And Mueller, to me, was the guy that we all considered to be fair. The Mueller report is in. McGahn testified 30 hours, and what I see going on in the House is more political revenge than it is anything else.
Well, does he have a point?
It's an interesting point about McGahn testifying for 30 hours, as Lindsey Graham said, to the Mueller team. And the reasoning behind that, according to the White House lawyers, was Mueller was a subordinate official of the Department of Justice, and that's part of the executive branch. So to reveal something within the executive branch, which is what, in fact, McGahn was doing, is one thing. To testify about his advice to the president before a separate branch of government is quite another. And now, I don't know that particular point has ever been adjudicated specifically, but perhaps in this case it will be. But I think, the president, at least, and his team have an argument that it is quite a different thing to send somebody up before Congress than it is to have them testify to a Justice Department investigator.
I want to move on now, Britt, and get your thoughts on Loretta Lynch and this transcript that was just released. I believe Doug Collins brought it forward, and it was a closed-door conversation, question and answers. Loretta Lynch really calling into question James Comey, the former FBI director, and how he, in her words, misrepresented her words during the Clinton email investigation during that now very infamous meeting that they had. She said, quote, "We were not at that point in September of 2015 ready to confirm that there was an investigation into the email matter or deny it. When the director, James Comey, asked me how to best handle that, I said, what I have been saying is we have received a referral and we are working on the matter." She's flatly accusing the former FBI director of mischaracterizing her words during that time.
Well, what the dispute is apparently about is he testified, Comey did, that he was directed by Loretta Lynch not to refer to what the FBI was doing in that case as an investigation, but to refer to it simply as a, quote, matter. And you will note that when she's in this recent testimony, she referred to it once again as a matter. So I suppose the dispute must come down to whether she actually directed him to call it that or whether she simply indicated that that's how she was referring to it. We may never know, but I will. So it's hard to know who to believe here. People do say self-serving things in testimony. Comey is famous for doing that. He's always portraying himself as this bulwark of liberty and justice and truth, while all around him are corrupt. So, he's no stranger to that scenario. We may never know. It's his word against hers in a meeting that I don't think was recorded anywhere.
She said that Comey's claim left her, quote, surprised, quite surprised. So obviously this is very interesting as we now have William Barr vowing to investigate the investigators, and then the investigators, is it fair to say, could be turning on each other. Final thoughts, Britt.
Well, that tends to happen, doesn't it? And we now have heard from, Comey versus Brennan versus Clapper or whoever. All are kind of pointing fingers at each other about who insisted that dodgy dossier be part of the application for a FISA warrant. One sense is that they anticipate that the use of the dossier is not going to come off very well in these forthcoming investigations, and they don't want any of the stains of that on their hands.
Really great to get your thoughts on all of that this morning. Britt Hume, thank you.